Super Bowl champions, Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you. Let the celebration begin.
Hope everyone had a good Memorial Day weekend. We got some nice weather. Roob, did you enjoy it a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like I told you, I went on a big road trip. I made it to the backyard a little bit.
Nice.
Spent some time in the laundry room, kind of branched out, headed out to the far reaches of the garage. So it was pretty adventurous for me.
It was a nice weekend. I'm glad we got some good weather. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Welcome to the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben and Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We have some stuff on the docket today, some interesting topics here of conversation. We're going to start with running back and whether or not we think the Eagles should add a veteran. One guy is already off the list. He already got a job. So one fewer name out there. And we'll go through. I put together a list of the all-time Andy Reid team, all-time Doug Pederson Eagles team. So I want to kind of compare and contrast those two. You put a list together of the top 10 Eagles myths. You debunked some of those, and we'll go through some of those.
Are you saying I didn't debunk all of them? Is that what you're saying here, Dave?
I think there's probably more than 10.
Oh, I thought you meant all the ones that I posted I didn't debunk. That's how I read your comment.
No. I will say that I thought one of them wasn't necessarily a myth, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue better or worse with a look at the cornerback position. I know that answer seems obvious, but we're going to take a deep dive into that position as a whole. But we're going to start with the veteran running back and this idea that they're going to add one. I think it's a valid idea, and I think that it's pretty clear the Eagles are interested in one. But to me, the top guy on their list, Carlos Hyde, is now off the board. He signs with Seattle. Was that your reaction too? To me, my reaction was, well, there goes their best option.
Yeah, but I thought it was a long shot because I think Carlos Hyde's a guy that probably wants a bigger workload than he would get here. He's a guy who had 250 carries last year. He had a 1,000-yard season. If you're in this offense, even if you're the number one back, you're probably not going to have a 1,000-yard season, much less if you're behind kind of a burgeoning star like Miles Sanders. So Hyde's at the point in his career, I think he's 29, I think he's almost 30, where I'm sure he wants to get more of a workload than he would get here. So I think if he was going to be coming here, it probably wouldn't have happened till later, it was obvious nothing else was available. And I don't know if you've seen the contract yet, but I would guess he got more money than the Eagles really want to pay their number 2/number 3 running back. So I think he was the best guy on the board, but I also thought it was kind of a long shot that he would wind up here. He's a good player.
I guess.
He's also bounced around, Dave, and we talked about this. Niners, Browns, Jacksonville, Houston, and so this is his 5th team since 17. And that's a lot of teams, and usually there's a reason for something like that.
That's fair, but when you just look at the football player as if they really want a complementary piece to Miles Sanders, the obvious choice to me was Carlos Hyde. He's a little more thunderous of a runner. I thought he would have helped them in goal line situations. And he was the type of player that if something were to happen to Miles Sanders, I think you could feel more confident in him becoming the guy over a period of a month or whatever else you need instead of some of the other guys out there, which leads us to the next two players. We'll get to LeSean McCoy in a second, but Devonta Freeman is interesting because he apparently had an offer on the table from the Seahawks and Freeman turned it down. And then there was some rumors out there about maybe he wants to retire. He refused that. Sorry. Interesting. It seems like he wants a lot more money than teams are willing to give him. And it might be a waiting game for him.
Yeah, and again, he's a guy who did not he was hurt in 18. He did not have a good year last year. And, you kind of have to go back to 2017 to find his last successful season in the NFL. And I think that's a red flag for a running back. I think there's some positions where you can look at a guy and say, an offensive lineman, a defensive tackle, say, all right, well, he's going to be okay. But with running backs, once they start that decline for whatever the reason, whether it's just, overuse or skills fading or injuries, age, losing a step, whatever it is, once that starts, you don't see it go back up. So Freeman's a guy who, and running backs don't, they're not getting paid. Even really good young ones are not getting paid. So, I think for there's a lot of guys on the street right now, running backs, veteran guys, and I think that's why they want more money than the market's willing to pay them right now. So it's a tricky thing because you want a veteran guy who can handle the workload, like you said. If something happened with Miles, who can get you through 3 or 4 games, but those guys want to be starters. And it's a very small. If you look at the Venn diagram of guys who can handle that workload and guys who are available, most of them are either coming off an injury or they're older guys. Now, all of them.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because otherwise they'd be on a team.
That's true, but I think running back's also a position where you can find guys, and the Eagles they've done that. I don't know if they want to rely on the guys they find. They had to do it a couple of years ago with like Josh Adams, ended up being their leading rusher. You can find guys.
Yeah, you can find Josh Adams,
but can you rely on them to fill in for Miles Sanders? Probably not. It's amazing what's happened to that position in terms of contracts over the last few years. I mean, the first thing to go was the idea that you're going to pay a running back top end money. We've seen teams get burned on those kind of contracts. The Todd Gurley one really comes to mind. And you have to think a running back has to be really special to give them any type of significant deal like that. And even if they're special, I mean, Todd Gurley was special and now he isn't. So you have to be really careful. But now even those middle ground contracts aren't there. I mean, Carlos Hyde and Devontae Freeman thought they were going to get paid this offseason. It's not happening. Even the two big deals last year were Mark Ingram and Tevin Coleman. At the time, you thought, well, those are really cheap deals. Now, I mean, it seems like I thought we're at the bottom, and it seems like we haven't found the bottom yet.
Yeah, it's funny because as the salary cap goes up every year, salaries go up and running back goes down or stays the same, but it's going down. And I think that's a product of teams really understanding what we've been saying for years. These guys have such a short shelf life, and so many of these guys, they have 1,400 yards at 23, 24, 26, 27. They're either out of the league or they're banged up or they're bouncing from team to team looking for that, that last check. There's so few guys. I can think of one of them, who have staying power. And, it did used to be, there used to be a lot more of those guys, Emmitt Smiths and, John Riggins, guys who played up until they were 32 at a high level. You just don't see it anymore, the pounding. And then the game's changing, and it's more of a throwing league, so there's more value on receivers, tight ends, corners, whoever has to do with the passing game. So it's really interesting dynamic. And, I think guys, the older veterans now are kind of feeling the brunt of it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. And we have to talk about Shady. We've talked about Shady a lot. You wrote a column over the weekend that he would be your guy. You would sign him right now. And I'm not there. And I think I've been pretty clear that I'm not there. I honestly don't know how much he has left. I understand that you're going to get to your points about how well he played down the stretch last year. But to me, him being a healthy scratch in the playoff run, man, if Andy Reid's not going to play you and Andy Reid's your guy, I have serious questions. So why do you think that Shady would help this team right now?
Yeah, I think the reason he got in Andy's doghouse, he had a really bad fumble in Green Bay, or actually it was at home against Green Bay. It was in Kansas City. It really probably cost the Chiefs a game. And then they signed Spencer Ware for the stretch run. So I think what happened with Shady in Kansas City really had more to do with that fumble. We've seen how Shady carries the ball, and it's always been an issue with him. He did a lot better as he got older. He went to Buffalo. He didn't fumble that much. But I think it was really the product of just the personnel the Chiefs had. Shady still averaged 4.6 last year, and I can't get past that number. Number 12 in NFL history by a running back at that age with 100 or more carries in the season. And he's never been hurt. The two things you look at are what's going on with the yards per carry and accumulating injuries. And most of these guys have one or the other. Some of them have both. Shady doesn't have either. So, while I'm not at the point where I'd build my future around him, he's made it clear he wants to play one more year. We're looking at 6 carries a game, maybe, 6 touches a game, a couple, maybe throw to him a little bit, give him a series here and there. You know how Doug is. When I look at Shady, and I watched a lot of Chiefs games last year, when he did play, he was effective. And, he had a higher rushing average than Saquon Barkley last year. But who would you rather have? I'm not under any illusions that he's the Shady of old, but I think when you're looking at how the Eagles want to use their acquisition, their running back that they're looking at signing, and what he gives you, I think it's a pretty good match. I think Shady's made a fortune over the years. He's had some big contracts. He saved money on tipping. I'm kidding.
That was Roob, Shady. That wasn't me.
Sorry, Dave made me say that. No, but seriously, when you look at what they need, like you said, he's a guy who can get you through a game. And he had 5 games last year where he had 10 or more carries. He averaged 5.3 yards per game in those games. So he's a guy that he can get into a rhythm and get you yards, can catch the ball a little bit. I think he'd be a good, influence on Miles and Boston, the younger backs, Elijah Holyfield, if he's here, whoever's here. He's got a relationship with Doug. He's got a great relationship with Deuce. He wants to be here. Number 25 is available. I think there's a lot of things that make this a good fit. And none of it has to do with the fact that he used to be here and, undoing Chip's damage. It's not about that. It's about, here's the options. Who's the best one?
Yeah, and it's also something we've brought up before. He has a base knowledge of the offense, which isn't completely irrelevant in this offseason. And really now the time frame that we're in late May. So any running, but even in a normal offseason, they wouldn't have the full offseason to learn the playbook, full offseason to gain the trust of the coaching staff. So Shady comes in with that. If they sign him, I don't know. I'm still not sold on the idea.
Well, who's your number one option right now? The guys who are available.
I guess Freeman. I think he's probably a slightly better player right now. I'd feel more comfortable if going with him for a month if you needed to. But the injuries are a concern. I mean, there aren't any great options left. I thought Hyde was a really good option. I'm interested to see that contract, especially because we learned that Freeman turned down what seemed to be a pretty decent deal from Seattle. The Eagles probably want to pay veteran minimum for one of these guys, which is a little bit more for Shady just because of his seasons in the league. I think it'd be just over $1 million a year for Shady. You probably wouldn't have to guarantee all of it. So maybe you kind of have a flyer on him and see if he comes in, how he looks. But I wonder do you think it's necessary for them to have a veteran running back? Is that a necessary add?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's important. I think there's so many unknowns around Boston Scott. I really like what I've seen from him, but the guy's got 60 career touches. He just hasn't played. Corey Clemens had enough injury issues that it's fair to wonder if he can stay healthy, even in getting into the season. And, Holyfield and the 2 undrafted rookies are they've never played. So it makes sense. Is it imperative? Is it a must have? I don't think so. I think you can probably get through the season with what you have. And if there's an issue, you can maybe pluck somebody off a practice squad, whether it's a Josh Adams or whoever. But I do understand their desire to bring one in. Shady didn't get cut by Buffalo till the end of training camp last year. They cut him really late, and he signed with the Chiefs the next day, and he played like a week later. So you can do that. If you can do that with a running back, you can go last minute. It's not ideal, but
is Shady different enough? A different enough player from Miles or Boston? It's just something I'm thinking. If they want someone who's kind of complimentary, and this isn't the end all be all, if they just want a solid back, but He's always kind of been known as a shifty runner who'll make guys miss, and that's kind of what Miles is, and that's kind of what Boston is to different degrees.
Yeah, I think Shady's probably a little more of a power runner than Miles. But I don't know. I'm not sure how choosy you can be. I've never been a big believer in you need some big giant guy at the goal line. I mean, I think you have a guy who can run, a guy who's fast. Those are the guys you want at the goal line. I think Boston Scott's a really good runner at the goal. He's got a real good, he's got low to the ground. He can find the end zone. So I don't worry about that. I think Shady's a good fit from that standpoint.
Okay. Anything else on the running back position?
No, but I think it's a good point. We don't know they're definitely going to add one, but it certainly seems that they will.
Yeah, for me, it's almost like, is it worth it? Maybe, but I don't think it's a necessary thing. I really want to see those three young players at training camp. They might have something with either Holyfield, Warren, or Killins, and we don't know, but you can find undrafted players. So especially at that position. So I'd be interested to see those guys at training camp. I don't know if the Eagles can wait that long to sign a veteran. So they're in a tricky spot there, but we'll see. I think it's probably more likely than not that they do still add someone.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right. I did a fun exercise last week. I put it together, and it's the all-time Andy Reid Eagles team and the all-time Doug Pederson Eagles team. And normally when I put together something like this, there's like some big conclusion at the end, but that's not the case for this, because Andy had 14 years in Philly. Doug Pederson is going into year 5. The Andy team is better. Like it's just a better team overall, but I think it was fun to put it together, and there are some interesting things as far as the positions go. So I'm just going to go through position by position, and let me know first if you think I made the right decision for each of them. At quarterback, and I just did a one team, so no backups here. Andy Reid's quarterback, probably the easiest thing I had here, gave him Donovan McNabb. Then for Doug Pederson's quarterback, this was a tough one, and I don't want this to devolve into the discussion that has plagued this city for 2 years, but I gave him Nick Foles. Eventually that spot will be owned by Carson Wentz, but for now, I gave it to Nick Foles, who's actually played more for Doug Pederson than Andy Reid. Fair?
Yeah, I would go along with Foles. I think I mean, how do you not? Who Andy Reid drafted Nick Foles, but he played more for Doug. Started at the end of the 2012 season for Big Red, but it's kind of hard to argue with a Super Bowl MVP. So yeah.
Yeah, and the way I did it, there are some guys who obviously played for both, which is a credit to Andy, really, that those guys have lasted so long. But I gave those players depending on who they played longer for. So we'll see that come back a little bit. And some of them were actually surprising when you look at the actual numbers. Running back, this was a tough one. I gave Andy Reid Brian Westbrook instead of LeSean McCoy, just because Westbrook.
You're just a hater, Dave. You're a hater. You're a Shady.
No, I mean Westbrook had. I mean, Shady is the best running back in franchise history, but Westbrook had more good seasons under Andy, and really 2 of Shady's best seasons came for Chip.
That's true.
That was my deciding. Would you have gone Shady or Westbrook there?
Well, I would have gone Shady, but that's just me. No, that's true. I think Shady, you make a good point, and you can go with either one. And as much as I like Miles, you take the body of work over basically 8 or 10 games.
Yeah, well, you meant Westbrook, but that leads me to Miles Sanders, who's already my Doug Pederson running back. Not a great list to choose from here. I mean, the leading
it's an
rusher,
understatement of the year.
The leading rusher under Doug Pederson is Wendell Smallwood. Second is Miles Sanders. Now, I could have gone LeGarrette Blount for what he meant to the Super Bowl team, but he was a limited player. They don't win the Super Bowl without him, but he was a limited player Jay Ajayi didn't have the long body of work.
Ryan Matthews is out there.
2016. Yeah, he was okay, but he had
Josh Adams.
Could have gone Josh Adams. Could have gone Darren Sproles, who Doug loves, but didn't play. Honestly, didn't play that much or that well. I mean, in Spurs he played well, but to me it was obvious that it was Sanders. So, and he'll run away with that this year, I'm sure. Wide receiver, I did 3 receivers. For Andy Reid, I had Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin, and T.O.
That's a pretty good trio right there. Pretty
good. I mean, T.O. we know wasn't there that long, but it's kind of hard to argue with what he did when he was on the field. For Doug Pederson, I had Alshon, Nelson Aguilar, and Jordan Matthews. Not great.
No.
I mean, who else? Torrey Smith.
No,
would you put him on there?
It's slim pickings. Yeah. No, that's you probably have Jalen Reagor would be about 5th on that list.
Yeah, I mean, there are some guys who are in their first year here. I was like, I know they haven't played yet, but
Robert Davis would be like 7th.
Tight end. This was a tough one for Andy Reid. I gave him Brent Selleck. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd go Selleck over Chad. Chad Lewis made 3 Pro Bowls, but he really made them as a favor. Basically, Andy picked him each year because Andy kept losing Pro Bowls and kept picking Pro Bowl teams, and he kept taking Chad Lewis with him. Chad was a good player, good red zone player, but I mean, Selleck
sent them to the Super Bowl.
Selleck had a stretch there from I guess it was like 2008 to 2012 or 13 where he was averaging like 55 catches and 650 yards, just a really good, solid, productive guy. And he showed up in my all-time Eagles never made a Pro Bowl team, which ran today. So
he had some really good years. You're right.
He just missed 1,000 yards. He had 998 that one year, or 997.
And that was when, I mean,
no, 985.
Yeah, and there weren't as many tight ends putting up those kinds of numbers then. Doug Peterson's tight end gave him Zach Ertz. Pretty easy one there. Let's move to the offensive line. Let me give you, moving left to right, Andy Reid's team. Trey Thomas, Todd Herremans, Jamal Jackson, Shawn Andrews, John Runyon.
Pretty good.
I thought about Jermaine Mayberry. Had a good stretch there, but the other, Todd Herremans, I had to get Todd Herremans on the list at one of those positions just because he was so good and so versatile for so long. I gave Jamal Jackson the nod over Hank Fraley. You cool with that?
Yeah, it's tough to keep Evan off there. This guy was a first-team All-Pro.
Evan Mathis.
So was Shawn Andrews.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I like what you said about Todd. I mean, he was pretty solid for a long time here.
And I can argue that Evan Mathis might have played his best under Chip.
Yeah.
Who eventually got him out of town. But Shawn Andrews in his prime was about as good as anyone. And then the tackles were easy for me, Trey and John Runyon, especially because on the Doug Pederson team, I gave him Jason Peters, who might have had better years under Andy Reid. He's actually played more games for Doug Pederson.
Yeah, that's surprising thinking about it, but
10 more games.
But, I think Runyon and Trey kind of go in as a ticket and Peters and Lane are a ticket. You kind of think of those two as bookends.
Exactly.
Who play together. So I like keeping them together.
Yeah. And then the other Pederson guys, Kelsey at center, who he played for Andy, of course, but just 2 years. Brandon Brooks at right guard. And then my left guard is Isaac Sayamalu. I know you disagree with that.
Well, I mean, you can make a case for Alan Barber. No, I mean, Wiz, I like Sayamalu. I think he's pretty good. I like Wiz on the team just because, I mean, and I think when Wiz replaced Sayamalu, really had more to do with, Sayamalu wasn't quite ready. Obviously, the next year he was. How many times do two guys get benched for each other?
Doesn't happen often, yeah.
But yeah, benched for each other. But I probably would have gone Wiz. Nothing against Sayamala, but it's when you look at that big red offensive line. I mean, there's three Pro Bowlers in there and two pretty solid guys. But Doug's O line probably gets the edge. You have four. I guess Brandon Brooks hasn't made All Pro, but you have three first team All Pros and a Pro Bowler, and a pretty solid guard. I think Sayamalo and Harriman's probably are a push. As good as Trey was, and I think Trey was a great left tackle. JP has to get the edge. Kelsey, big edge over Jamal. Jamal was a good player. Brooks over Andrews. That's close, but maybe Andrews at his
body of work, I think, at this point goes.
Yeah, Brooks. Andrews probably could have had a Brandon Brooks-like career if a lot was different. Lane and Runyon is an interesting one. Similar players.
Lane's better.
Lane's probably better. Yeah, Runyon was good, but that Doug Pederson O-line is really good.
It's really good. Defensive ends. This was easy for Andy Reid's team. Trent Cole and Hugh Douglas. No brainers there, really. For Doug Pederson, Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett. I think Graham is the easy one. I gave it to Barnett over. Could have gone Vinny Curry. Could have gone Chris Long.
How about Chris Long in there?
Yeah, I could have done that. Barnett's played longer here now than Chris Long. I certainly could have gone Chris Long, who wasn't a starter either. Chris Long got the benefit, and this is nothing against him. He got the benefit of coming in on third downs as kind of a NASCAR guy.
I would have gone Barnett. I would have gone Chris Long.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could have gone Michael Bennett too. Had one good year, but I thought Barnett, the body of work, gave it to him.
Body of work.
Yeah, he's played 3 years here. He's been a starter for 2.
And Chris Long was. I think Chris Long probably made as much of an impact on this team as probably more of an impact than Derek Barnett in 2 years than Barnett did in 3. But it's an interesting conversation either way.
Okay. Defensive tackle for Andy's team, I had Corey Simon and Darwin Walker. I thought about putting Hollis in there. It was tough because Hollis was such a different player than Simon and Walker. So what do you want? Do you want a guy who's going to go after the quarterback or a run stuffer? I went with the sack guys over the run stuffer, but Hollis could have been in there for sure.
I have a Darwin Walker story, but I'm going to tell you Darwin Walker story next podcast. Remind me. It's long.
What a tease, man.
I know. That's going to really get the ratings way up.
God. People they're just going to be waiting by their computers for the next
for that Darwin
podcast.
Walker story. It's a good one.
My defensive tackles, Fletcher Cox and Tim Jernigan. Fletcher, the easy one. Would you have gone Jernigan? I don't know who else you'd put there.
Yeah.
Benny Logan for a year?
I would have put Hargrave up there.
Thought about it.
He's about earned that spot.
I put 2 linebackers on each list.
Yeah.
For Andy Reid's, I put him in
put
nickel.
3 on each one, right?
No, 2 on each. I have him in nickel because I had more cornerbacks to put in, and I can do whatever I want. I made up the list. I put Trotter and Emmons in there. Fair enough, right?
Okay.
For Doug's team, I put Jordan Hicks and Nigel Bradham.
Yeah, you can make a case for Kendricks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd probably go Kendricks over Bradham.
Over Bradham.
Yeah. Well, if you're trying to line them up, I don't know. That's one thing. But if you're just looking for the 2 best linebackers,
really, I think Bradham's done more. Bradham has 4 years as a starter.
Yeah, I thought Kendricks was really good in 17, and they were different kind of guys, but Kendricks really around the ball, playmaker, good in coverage. I like Kendricks, but I guess they're pretty close.
Okay, and then at cornerback, I could have gone years before getting to the other guys, to the Doug Pederson guys. Troy Vincent, Bobby Taylor, Lito Shepard are my 3 corners. But I could have kept going. I have Jalen Mills, Ronald Darby, and Patrick Robinson at corner.
Yeah, I wouldn't have Bobby Taylor on that team. I would have. I mean, I'd have Asante or Lito or even Sheldon over Bobby Taylor. I like
Really?
Bobby Taylor, but I mean, the guy had never made a tackle in his life. And
Well, you're putting Asante in over him because Bobby didn't tackle?
Well, I mean, Asante was picking off 7, 8 passes, 9 passes a year. Bobby Taylor didn't get a lot of interceptions, played well against Michael Irvin. He was a good player. I think he made a Pro Bowl late in his career, but I mean, Sheldon, I would take Sheldon, Asante, or Lito over Bobby Taylor. I mean, nothing against Bobby. He's a good player, but I mean, a huge pick six, I think, in the playoffs against the Giants, like in 2000 or whenever it was, but 2001. But I would probably go Troy Vincent and Asante. Asante he just changed games. He was just such a playmaker.
That's fair.
I'd probably go Asante.
And then a safety, Doc, obviously. I put Quentin Michael on there over Michael Lewis. That was a tough one. And then the Eagles were easy. It was Malcolm and Rodney McLeod.
Doug's team was Malcolm and Rodney.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would go with Q. Q's a great story. I think he's such an inspiration. The guy played special teams for like 4 years before, he was buried. Jim Johnson was playing Sean Considine and all these guys ahead of him, and he finally got a chance, and he ended up being a Pro Bowl safety. So, yeah, I like Q on there with Doc. Malcolm and Rodney, that's a no-brainer.
You want the specialists?
No.
Okay.
I'll take Akers over Jake Elliott. I'll take Landetta over Donnie. And you got to take Dornbos over Lovato. No, just because he's Dornbos, got to.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so it's a fun comparison. It's good stuff. Overall, Andy gets the edge, but it's closer than you'd think for 14 years versus 4 years. Hey, your NBC Sports Philadelphia podcasts are all now on the My Teams app. Listen to Eagle Eye, Sixers Talk, Phillies Talk, and Flyers Talk now on the My Teams app.
10 Eagles myths. Reuben Frank puts them to rest. Well, we don't have to go through all of them, but which one on here was your favorite?
Which one was my favorite? That's a great question. It's funny because everybody kept calling me to do little radio hits and talk about these, and everybody brought up the same ones. Chip Kelly one, the Buddy Ryan one, and the Alshon one. That one's really interesting because the notion that the Eagles would have beat the Saints in the playoffs in 2018 if Alshon didn't drop that ball that turned into a Marshawn Lattimore interception, they still would have had third down. They still would have had to convert either third or fourth down. They were not a good red zone team that year. And they still might have had, the Saints still might have had time to go drive and get a field goal to win the game. So certainly they would have had a better chance to win. But the notion that if Alshon catches that ball, they win the game, I never got that, but you hear that. But I think my favorite is the Buddy one, just because Buddy is such a divisive figure in this city.
I don't know if he is. I think everyone loves Buddy except you. If you
asked 100 Eagles fans who they liked more, Andy Reid or Buddy Ryan, I think it'd be 50-50. One of these guys, went to a Super Bowl, won 9 playoff games, 5 NFC champions. Buddy not only never won a playoff game, never came close, got blown out in all 3. Never scored more than 12 points in a playoff game. And yet he had Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, Andre Waters, Seth Joyner, Wes Hopkins, Randall, Keith Jackson, Byron Evans, Mike Quick. He had so much talent. How could you have all that talent, never win a playoff game, and be a good coach? It's impossible. So the notion that Buddy's a good coach or was a good head coach while he was in Philly, I'll shoot that one down anytime somebody brings up Buddy's name. He was fun. He put the Eagles back on the map. It was a blast covering his teams because there was so much personality, and you never knew what the heck was going to happen on the field, off the field, in the locker room, in the parking lot, anywhere. You never knew what he was going to say, insulting people. And there was something about him that really kind of resonated with Eagles fans who were so hungry for somebody to come in here and wake this franchise up. Was he a good coach? No way.
I think the one on here that I've heard you say the most is definitely Mike Mamula. Your myth is that Mike Mamula was a first round bust. And it's funny because every time the draft rolls around and the Eagles take someone, especially if that player had a good combine, inevitably we'll be around someone who says, "What is he? Another Mike Mamula?" And you go, actually, and I go, "Oh no, here he goes. He's doing it again."
Well, it's funny because every year around the draft, I'll get a couple texts from like national writers asking for Mamula's phone number, like to do that obligatory, combine, story. But Mike wasn't a great player, and obviously, if you have Warren Sapp on the board and Mike Mamula on the board, you take Warren Sapp. But that wasn't his fault. Mike Mamula is a 255-pound pass rusher. He was playing every down, should have been playing third down. Still had 31 and a half sacks in 6 full seasons. He missed 1 full season with an injury, but he was a guy that averaged 6 sacks a season, five and a half sacks a season. Actually, it was 5 years he played. So he averaged about 5.5 sacks a season, which it is what it is. He was an average player, undersized player. He was misused by Ray Rhodes. If he was coming in and just playing third downs like he would today, he would have been healthier. He would have been more productive. But when you draft somebody in the 7th round, he better be out there on first and second down, I think. So he was, but 31 and a half sacks, puts him in the top 10 in Eagles history for a guy who only played 5 years. And 5.5 sacks a season. He averaged 0.4 sacks per game in his career. You look at Brandon Graham is lower than that. So you take it all in perspective. And, I think Mike hated the media. He was not and he kind of opened up later after his career and became, a lot more well-spoken and cooperative and did interviews and stuff. But, the first few years he played, he never talked to the media. Fans didn't like him because of that. This guy's a 7th pick in the draft. He's not producing like he should. Why isn't he talking? People started ripping him, and that made him even more suspicious. And it was kind of a cycle. So he wasn't real popular here. He didn't have a great career, but he was, a bust is John Harris, 1 career sack, first round pick. Marcus Smith, what do you have? 2 career sacks, first round pick.
Yeah, something like that.
Mamula had 31 and a half. So bust is the wrong word. Disappointing. Yeah. But a bust, no way.
And I think the one I've heard you use second most is Todd Pinkston, which for me, I kind of grew up watching those teams. So Pinkston was always a guy who I thought was worse than what he was. So you're preaching to me about this one, but it's something you go back and look at his numbers. He was an okay receiver.
Yeah. Now from 2001 to 2005, he had 19 catches of 40 yards or more. That was the 3rd most in the league during that 4-year period, behind only T.O. and Randy Moss, and averaged 15.1 yards per catch, which I think was 7th best in the league. So Donovan liked to throw the ball deep to Pinkston. His overall numbers were not great, although, they could sure use a guy now who caught 60 balls for 850 yards. Now that sounds like a lot because they haven't had that. But he was, again, he was a 2nd round pick. He had a short career because of the Achilles. He tore his Achilles in training camp in 2005. He was actually having a great Super Bowl. He was 4 for 82 in the first half. And then he got dehydrated and didn't play the rest of the game. Never played again. So, he had a real chance to kind of change the narrative about his career in the Super Bowl. He was on his way to a 100-yard game. If the Eagles won, he might have been an MVP candidate. He had 130, 140 yards, never played again. So I think his career is it was very short, but he was a good deep ball threat. And again, like Mamula, disappointing career, but he had his moments.
And since I teased it earlier, the one that isn't really a myth is that the Eagles should have kept Nick Foles instead of Carson Wentz. That's an opinion, an incorrect opinion, but still an opinion. Anything else you want to touch on before we move on from these?
No, I think that's good. I might have to do round 2. I'll come up with 10 more myths.
Okay, there you go. Better or worse today is cornerback. Let's just dive in. We've kind of been alternating offense and defense, so we're up to corner today. The big addition this year, obviously, Darius Slay. They go out and trade a third and a fifth round pick to get him from the Lions. They give him an extension. Right there, I mean, it's pretty simple to me that they're better because of that, and everything else can go away. And I think that's probably true. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think you can't forget Roby Coleman, who I think has a chance to be, an upgrade. And, just subtracting some guys who have been so uneven, and Darby, and I assume Rasul's not going to be here, or at least won't be in the rotation. Who knows about Sydney? But those guys, just injuries, inconsistency, getting beat deep, whether they're here or not. Obviously,
and you can
Darby,
put Mills in that list too. I mean,
you can put Mills in that list too
on the team, but he's no longer a corner.
Right, he's no longer a corner. So you're taking out a lot of guys who are really there were problems for a lot of reasons, mainly injuries, getting beat deep, inconsistency, and you're replacing him with guys who I would think are going to be an upgrade. And if Cravon and Avante can play a full year like we've seen them play in bits and pieces, and I think they're we'll see. I don't know. The jury's out, but I don't think there's any question they're better. I think Cravon has a chance to be a good player. I think they both do, but I'm kind of intrigued by him. So I definitely think, and he didn't have a full season by a long shot. So I think they're definitely better, possibly significantly better. New coach as well. We'll see how that affects everything. But just Slay, just Slay for Darby, they're better. But I think even below that, they're better as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Roby Coleman too, because he's a guy we haven't really talked about a ton since they brought him in, but he's widely considered to be one of the better nickel corners in the league. I think their one big problem right now is CB2, whoever that is. It seems like it's Avonte Maddox right now. Maybe Sidney Jones competes for that job, but that might not be good enough. I don't know. We haven't seen enough from Avonte. We certainly haven't seen enough from Sidney Jones. And when you have a really good corner on one side, like they expect to have with Darius Slay, teams aren't going to throw that way. I mean, they're going to attack, whether it's Avonte or Sidney or whoever else is in the Rasul. They're going to attack that spot, and if that player can't hold up, then you're in some trouble.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's going to be the second wide receiver because Slay's going to travel with the number one guy. So there's that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, somebody's going to have to really take ownership of that, that spot. And we're projecting because whether it's Avonte, Rasul, Sidney, whoever it is, hasn't done it over a full season as a full-time starting outside cornerback. So that's a big question mark. But
it's tough. And you think about like when they play the Cowboys, you figure Slay's going to travel with Amari Cooper, but they just drafted CeeDee Lamb. So you have Avonte Maddox on CeeDee Lamb. Are you fine with that? I don't know. And the other part of the way this roster is constructed at that position, Roby Coleman's the nickel, but you can make a really strong argument that both Avonte Maddox and Cravon LeBlanc, that's their best position. So maybe you have too many interior guys. I'm kind of on the same lines as you with Rasul. I'm not convinced he's going to be here even after taking the pay cut. Sidney Jones is still an important piece to this, in my opinion.
I think he's really the key to everything. What a story it would be if he could come back, be healthy, have a good year, kind of, in year 4, be that player that people have been waiting for him to be for a few years now. I don't know how big a chance there is. There's been times where he's been healthy and he still hasn't played well. That's my concern. So, can he get healthy? Can his legs be, 16-game legs that can get him through a season? Because we haven't seen that. And even if they do, what level can he play? We've seen him make a play here or there. That gives you some hope. Then he doesn't play in the playoffs. So if Sidney can be 80% of the player they thought when they drafted him, maybe he can hold it down. But it's a big question mark.
Yeah, that'd be.
He is such a big key to this season because they do have a big hole there.
And the funny thing is, we said that last year too, because they really could have used him to be that player last year. And I think the coaching staff just really likes Avonte Maddox. He's tough. He's really competitive. He's confident, which is important. But I think Sydney still has the higher ceiling. I don't know if that potential is still in there. I don't know if that player is still there, but if he is in there somewhere and they can somehow figure out how to get it out of him, that's their best option still to me, is having him become the second corner. Because if he's you're right, if he's 80% of what they thought they were getting back in 2017, pairing him with Darius Slay and having Roby Coleman as the nickel, it's pretty good.
I think if I just transcribe the last 2 minutes of this podcast column right there.
There you go. Do it.
I'll do that. Give me your best guess. Who's opening day CB2?
I think Avonte Maddox.
I'm going to go Sydney.
Okay, if it's Sydney, the Eagles probably would be thrilled because that means he's won the job. I don't know if they're going to have enough time to see that from him.
That's fair. Yeah.
I think missing OTAs, as silly as it might sound, I think it hurts them because at least they would be trying different options right now. They'd be mixing and matching their groups. My fear would be when it comes to that is that when they get the training camp, they're going to say, we have X amount of time, and we don't even know if training camp's going to start on time. So they're going to get the training camp, and they might say, we have to start preparing for the season. We can't really mess around with too many competitions. Like we'll call it a competition, but you have a head start because we have to get our starters right. I think that could happen.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. A lot, but they have a lot of different options. I'm not sure how good those options are, but they're definitely better than last year.
All right. Before we wrap this up, John Clark had a chance to catch up with Brian Dawkins. It is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I thought it was really cool. This is something that Dawkins talked a bunch about, especially in recent years, his own battles with depression and suicidal thoughts earlier in his career. But the one thing I really enjoyed the way his perspective on mental health was that, like, yeah, we all have mental health. And I thought it was cool. Did you get a chance to listen to those comments?
I did. And I just think that it's so important. And Doc's been talking about these issues for a while now. And I know it's inspired a lot of people. You know, you can hear experts and doctors talk about these things, and it doesn't always resonate. People are like, I don't need that. I can get through this by myself without any help. But then when you see like one of the toughest football players of his generation, hardest hitters, the most macho dude ever, talking about his own struggles, I think it's really important. I think it really resonates with a lot of people who maybe, hadn't really considered that they can get help. And I'm sure he saved some lives. And I think it's, we had a long talk with him at the Hall of Fame a couple of years ago in Canton. And here's Brian Dawkins going into the Hall of Fame. It's like one of the biggest weekends of his life. And the most important thing was that he used that platform to talk about those struggles that he had, like you said, and how he wants to devote his life to talking about these things, bringing them out in the open, being transparent about it and trying to get through to kids, to people of all ages who might be struggling. And, don't be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to take medicine if that helps you, or whatever techniques. I know he talks about his breathing and meditating, and just so many different techniques. We've always known Doc was a Hall of Fame player, but I think the work he's doing with mental health right now really helps make him he's always been a Hall of Fame person too, but it's just really important work, and I'm really proud of him.
Yeah, it's been cool to see. His main goal is to kind of take the stigma away from it. And it's kind of what we've seen Brandon Brooks do the last few years with his anxiety. It's important stuff because these guys are viewed as like indestructible superheroes almost. So for them to use their platform, it's been really cool. If you get a chance, check out the Dawkins interview on NBCSportsPhilly.com. Certainly worth your time. And we hope the pod was worth your time. If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor, go and rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Rube, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be back on Thursday with another episode of Eagle Eye. Everyone take care.